Hello, everyone. So, before we begin, just a couple quick things here. Number one, if you can hear the background noise, I apologize. I've been waiting for the neighbor to finish mowing his lawn to record this, but he's apparently mowing literally everyone's lawn outside, so we're just gonna have to put up with it. Also, number two, if you if you have just signed up for my Patreon, thank you. I had quite a few sign up last month. The credits will change somewhere like about a week from now. So if you're paid up to like the top tier and you want your permanent credit in the list, that'll come once Patreon sorts it out. It takes a while for it to like account for everybody. And then if you're waiting for a shout out, that'll come here in the next few days. So thank you very much for all of that. I really do appreciate the support. You do keep the channel going, and I appreciate that a lot. So I wanted to do a tier list. It's been quite a bit, and I always do Transformer tier lists, so I wanted to do something for my Tokusatsu people. We're going to be talking about all the various gimmicks that Kamen Rider has been doing for its toy lines. Now, this is going to try very hard to focus on the gimmick item itself and how it functions, rather than how it functions. I'm trying not to include the belt itself too much in this. We're gonna try to focus on just like how the gimmicks work and how they are on their own, but of course they're meant to work with the belts and the toys, so yeah, that's obviously gonna play a part in it, but it shouldn't be too bad. And this way I get to actually like have the time to talk about these things because there's not too many. Alright, so we have my traditional list judging on the value that I impart to these items: Holy Grail, Premium Price, Retail Release, Bargain Bin, and Flea Market. That's just my gimmick. I'm going to do every tier list that way. So, we're going to start with Ryuki and the Advent cards, the first of 3 card gimmicks that Kamen Rider Toys did. So, these aren't terrible. So, like, the card gimmicks I actually do like. And I do like that in this series they could implement them in different ways. Every rider had their own different way of activating them, and that comes from the fact that they rely on physical contact. The cards themselves have holes cut in them, and when you slide a card into one of these devices, it hits buttons. Just like a lot of these gimmicks on this list do. But because of that, there's more than one way for all these things to function, and it's not as limiting as, say, Rouse and Rider cards. So I actually don't mind it too much. Now, obviously, cards themselves are not the most exciting of things to hang on to, so I'm going to drop it right there, right in the middle, at the retail release level, and we're going to kind of use that as a baseline for everything. And then it's immediately followed by the Rouse cards from Kamen Rider Blade. This is, so design-wise, I do like this a little bit better. Because it is using a playing card theme, they do look a little bit more natural. They actually have playing card suits on them. If you want to play them as actual playing cards, that is a thing you can actually do. These rely on the barcode scanner that would also be used in Decade. So you are a little bit more limited in how these function, because no matter what you're doing, you're swiping the card. There's a few things where you can put, insert cards in, but for the most part, you're still just swiping a card. So it's a little bit more limiting, but I like the design style more. I like the ancient looking artwork. I like the imprisoned monsters. I think that looks actually really cool. It's not as good at informing what it does outside of just having the name on there, so sometimes there can be a little bit of a disconnect, but I'm actually going to put it maybe on par with the Ryuki stuff. I don't think it's like terribly interesting, but it's definitely, I think there's a little bit more quality put into those than there was the Ryuki ones, at least design wise. Function wise, Ryuki, yeah, there's advantages to Ryuki, though admittedly the whole gimmick does mean that there's a more limited amount of things they can program the belt to do, because the barcodes have like a much wider spread of options they could potentially scan. So, okay, so we'll call them even. We'll call the card gimmicks on even footing. And then it's just down to design preference. If it's down to the design preference, then yeah, I'm gonna put the Rouse cards ahead of the Advent. All right. So, Fwessels. Now, you might not even realize that this counts because, Kamen Rider Kiva didn't really emphasize these the way that later series would. But it does. So, Fwessels, you would hard to call as like the collectible gimmick thing because they were always included with everything that they required. The Kiva belt had every Fwessel that Kiva ever used outside of outside of the one that would come with Tatsalot. But that's pretty much but they sold them individually too. They actually did sell like candy toy Fwessels, just like they do modern gimmicks. More so if you lost them. So as a gimmick themselves, they are a lot more limited. They do rely on buttons and button presses, and little nubs to press buttons. And they don't really do anything on their own. They're just little pieces of clear plastic with a little bit of paint and design on them. As a gimmick themselves, are not really interesting. It felt like something more like it's something that makes sense to stick in Kivat's mouth more than anything that's appropriate for the vampire gimmick. These aren't even like glass whistles where like there's a stained glass pattern to them. That might have tipped it over the edge a little bit, but as it stands, no. Fwessels as gimmicks, I think, are really boring. And of course, they function like gimmicks, but of course there isn't any additional thing you can get. There isn't like special effects. You're not missing anything. If you bought all the DX toys, you have all the Fwessels that exist, and there's nothing really to collect. Granted, they might not have been viewing it that way, but it functions that way, so we're going to include it. All right, Decades Rider cards, So once again, we are dealing with the same gimmick as Blade. It's just scan the cards in, and again, that does give you a much larger pool of sound effects that you can trigger, but also gives you a more limited amount of things you can do with the card. Of course, Decade didn't really, because it's a short-run series and toy line, they didn't have really time to come up with different ways of, working in the cards. You have they scan in the belt, and well, with the original toy, that's it. They didn't scan with the DN driver. That came later. But again, do we want to include the fact that Ganbaride started with this one, and you could scan Decade cards into the Ganbaride to do a whole bunch of things? I mean, that does mean it has more function, but I feel like that was just... I feel like that was incidental more than anything. Decade's using cards at the time, so we use cards in the arcade machine, or vice versa. But you know what? I'm actually putting it low because of that reason. Because... with Advent cards and the Rouse cards, all the important ones I could get from buying things. I get from, like, intentional purchases. Decade cards, a lot of the ones, even the ones he used in the show, were distributed through that arcade machine, and the only way to get them was to buy cards and hope you got lucky that one from the show popped up, and not just some, like, random, like, Agito doing a rider kick card or something. So like, as much as I like the Decade cards and much as I like the Deca driver, I don't like the distribution method. I feel like the original set was super hard to get a hold of because they had these super weird limited ways of releasing them. So yeah, Decade has to go to the bottom of these three as a result. Honore Decado. Alright. Gaia Memories. Alright, so if you've been with this channel a long time, you know how much I love Gaia Memories. At one time, I could legitimately say I owned every Gaia memory that existed, which totaled over 200. And then they did those gigantic boxes of 99 in Japan, and all of a sudden I'm like, I can't afford that. That, like, after shipping, that'd be like $500 just for a bunch of plastic noisemakers. No, you've ruined my complete collection. Oh, so frustrating. Gaia memories were super cool. So the Gashapon ones worked on their own. Like Gashapon candy toys, you could just keep hitting the button. You can get a whole bunch of sound effects out of them. They didn't work as well in the driver, but they still kind of worked. So it's fine. And then the DX ones, they didn't sell any like independent DX. Well, that's a lie. There's a couple of exceptions. But for the most part, all the ones from the show you could get just by buying all the DX toys. They didn't go like too ham on doing like DX packs of extra ones. So the great thing about Gaia memories is that they are infinite functionality. Because all the electronics are in the Gaia memories themselves, you can just keep making them, and that's exactly what they did. And because of that, every Gaia memory ever works in every double toy release, whether you have the original DX or whether you just got the complete selection in. Every Gaia memory released between that over a decade of time will work, and they will work together. That's pretty freaking cool. And yeah, they just make fun, like they're good size, they good function. They're just nice pieces. They're just really nice, like a little bit of fiddle function and nice little sound effect. I really, really love Gaia memories. So all the way to the Holy Grail for me. All right, O medals. I do love me some Kamen Rider O's. Now, on the surface, these aren't a whole lot to write home about. It's just a coin. They are very nice coins. They're very nice medallions, but inevitably they are just coins. They don't do anything on their own except look kind of cool. The belts and everything's scanning them in. That is cool. The combination function is cool. The fact that like you can pattern however you want. If you want to do it out of order, you can do that. If you want to just pair your favorites together, even it doesn't make sense. It's you just put two heads and a foot in the driver and you're scanning that. But that works too. The belt doesn't stop you. So there is a versatility function to talk about here. But we also have to talk about execution. Now, the original DX toys were poorly executed because you could still see the chip inside them. When a lot of us figured out that the way to fix it is just take the metal apart, spray paint the inside silver, and then put it back together, and boom, the chip is hidden and the metal looks way better. So it was it took a while before we started getting metals that were actually nice looking and painted and didn't look hollow. So these, let's see, what do we do with these? Because the only thing you can do is flip them. Like all you can do is just flip them in the air. That's about the only function they have on their own. I do like the design. I do like the theme. I'm going to put it low retail release. Only for like, because I feel like retail release is becoming the home of like, if it doesn't do anything on its own. I like O medals a lot, but I will acknowledge that I like them just because they look neat. And the function is fine. The function is fine. I think there's items on here that work a lot better. So right now I'm putting it here at retail, but I might bump it to premium, even though it's at the bottom of the retail release here. Just give me a minute to figure this one out. All right, Astro Switches. Astro Switches are pretty fantastic. While I'm not high on Forze as a show, the toys are fantastic because you get this belt that basically turns into this mad science laboratory. Every kind of, just a whole bunch of switches, things to hit, buttons, levers, all kinds of things. It's fun. It's fun, and it's fun that you can customize your own by switching all of these things out. And what made them really neat was the fact that, there was a function to, like, every one of them had a unique function. Levers, knobs, wheels, buttons, all different manner of things in order to activate them as little accessory gimmicks. That made them really cool, So, you could combine the ones that had your favorite, like hand feel function, but also your favorite sound effects. You had a lot to do. And they make nice little fiddle toys too. I'm not generally I'm not over the moon about them. It sounds like I am. If anything, like the design function of them, I think is a little bit under some things. And yeah. But I think for what they are and for how they function with the belt, they think they actually were really, really good. I thought the toys were really, really fun. All right, the wizard rings. These, whenever I tell people that like Kamen Rider toys and toys out of Japan are like just like super special and next level, this is the one I show them. This is the one I tell them about. So wizard rings have this super cool thing where like they don't have a battery in them, but when you hold them over the belt, they light up. Like it looks like a magic trick. So to convey that with a toy, I think is super cool. Also, notice this video is going much longer than I expected, so let's speed this up a little bit. All right, yeah, I'm putting Wizard in the premium price. It does do something that I really don't like Gimmick's doing. It has a like a motion function that doesn't accomplish anything. So like in the case of the Wizard rings, like the visor you can flip down, which is supposed to make it go from like looking just like a big gaudy ring to looking like Wizard's mask. And that's okay, but it's not like I wish it. I kind of wish it wasn't a thing. I wish it was just a ring. But that's just a pet peeve of mine. I think the gimmick and the function is super cool and interesting. Lock seeds. So once again, with a lock seed, you're getting exactly what you were getting before. You are getting a toy that independently functions and has an infinite amount of things you can do because most of the sound effects are built into the lock seed rather than the toy itself. Now, fruit padlocks is probably the hardest concept to sell people on, but it does exist. It's a legitimate thing. So I think the overall function of it is super cool. I think how it functions with the different belts is really good. I will admit, aesthetically, it has always been really weird to me. It has always been very weird to me. I want to put it there because it's definitely a really cool collectible. I still have a ton of my original lock seeds. It's the reason I didn't get the complete selection because I've still got all the DX ones. So yeah, they're really cool. They're really cool. It's just a little odd. They're odd, but they're cool. All right, shift cars. Now, thematically, I could never get behind shift cars because I could not see, like, after we got through with, like, magic rings, switches from space and all this, I couldn't get behind Hot Wheel cars being a power-up gimmick for a superhero. But, like, I will admit, it visually, shift cars are probably the most striking on the list because they aren't limited to a base design like everything else is. Astro switches all had to be the same box shape. Wizard rings all had to be the same size roughly. It's roughly the same shape. Shift cars could be anything. Trucks, construction vehicles, bikes later on. There's a ton of stuff to those. Like if you like the car, just like the toy car aspect, you've got a ton of variety with this one, and that is something to be accounted for. Functionally, I don't find them terribly interesting. Again, it's one of those gimmicks that doesn't really do much on its own, and it's a little like flip transformation. Like, I wish that was a little bit more interesting because it's supposed to turn it into some kind of lever. All it really does is flip up the rear end so you can like grip it a little bit better, but it doesn't feel like a gear shift or anything. So I kind of wish it did. I wish that transformation element was a little bit more interesting. Before in my head, I was gonna go, oh, this is a bargain bin item. But the more I think about it, like, no, there is actual edge. There's actual advantage to this. I'm gonna put it low retail. Keep in mind, these could float. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna put it top of retail. That feels a little bit better right now. But yeah, the shift cars actually do have some advantages to them, even if I am not. It's one of those things where I can admit there's something really cool about them, but it's not personally cool to me. So I will give it its credit. Icons. So I think it's no secret I don't like Ghost. I don't like Kamen Rider Ghost at all. But we are judging the toys, and when I judge a toy, I feel like when I reviewed the Ghost Driver, I was a little bit more generous to it because there is like this creepy, like macabre aesthetic when you combine the belt and the icon that is actually a little bit interesting visually. But when I think of the icons themselves, I'm kind of just let down and disappointed. I mean, I think one of the things that disappoints me the most is that in the show, in the fiction, they actually are shown to have visuals of their own. You see, like when he hits the button, it makes a sound effect happen, and then like the number or whatever of the icon glows off of it as like an image, and that is not replicated in any way. There's no light effect and there's no sound effect to the icons, which means they're really poorly representing what they do in the show, and it's weird. So like when you tumble through the icon, it doesn't matter what you land on. You put it in the belt, it works. The belt has no idea if the sound effects it's playing are actually matching the image on the belt on the icon, and I don't like that. It feels like there is a disconnect between what the belt does, and what the icon does, especially because I can make the icon do everything that the belt can make it do. So I've never been a big fan of them. I've never been big. I mean, I think much better gimmicks have come out since then. Like they have at most they have like a good hand feel. I think that's about the only thing I could give them credit for. Gashats. I do love some Gashats. So guess what? Once again, we are dealing with the same thing we're dealing with Kamen Rider Double's Gaia memories, in that you can make as many as you want because all the electronics are in the Gashats. And now we're going to apply a few other tricks to them. For starters, they work in both slots of the driver rather than the double driver, where you either match the silver side or the gold side, one or the other, not switchable. You also have this really cool mirror box effect in the belt. You have the overlay effect for the auxiliary ones. You had special sound effects for the auxiliary ones so that they could be the main Gashat. You can use that as a main henshin. They do the same thing with the primary henshins. They can be a secondary Gashat, and have a completely unique sound effect. Half the sound effects these toys are capable of never appeared in the show. That's a lot of stuff. And of course, again, that functionality to them and the fact that like they do function on their own. They have a completely different function when you use them independently of the driver than they do when they're in the driver. It's so good. Like there's so much good about the Gashats. So I do feel like it's an evolution of the Gaia memory. I do feel like it is just like one of the most satisfying things to play, rider gimmicks to play with, because like literally everything it does is cool and feels good. Putting in the driver feels good. Hearing the sound effects every time you hit something or it does something sounds good. Such a good gimmick. Such a good gimmick. All right, we are at full bottles now, and yeah, it's quite a downgrade. It's quite a downgrade from what we got just the year prior. So full bottles are again one of those. It has no lights, it has no sounds on their own. They are just physical objects that are just like, and it's just what does it do? Now, I will admit, like there is this neat little thing where like you can shake them up. You hear the little rattle that you hear in the show. Like it looks like there's fluid in the bottle. When you insert them in the belt and the belt is like cranking them and you can see the fluid bouncing up and down, that's a neat little visual trick, and that means the belt itself has a lot going on. But the gimmick toys themselves are pretty disappointing. For starters, if I'm like shaking a bottle of fluid, I shouldn't hear clacking for just to start. And then it has another one of those things that I hate when these belts do, which is like it has a motion function that accomplishes nothing. You twist the cap, nothing happens, and I thought like you had to twist the cap into the right position in order to like insert it into the belt. Like, oh, if you have this like, like if it's like if you haven't opened it up like that, like it won't go into the driver or anything. You have to like twist it to open up. Nope. Nope, doesn't work like that. The driver doesn't care. So it's just a lot of like nonsense visual function. Now, it is more versatile than some of the others because there are a ton of these. There's a ton in the belt that never came out as full bottles, strangely enough. It's one of those belts with a lot of lost noises they never took advantage of. Here's hoping for a 10-year after movie that brings everyone back and gives us a whole bunch of extra full bottles we never got before. But failing that, I'm going to bargain bin it. They are not as offensive to me as the icons are. They do have sound effects associated with them, but not visuals associated with them when they're on their own like icons do. They're more fun to collect than the Fwessels are. They at least have a little bit of function as opposed to those. Yeah, it's a weird one to talk about. All right, ride watches. Again, there's a motion function that doesn't accomplish much, but at least shifts it between like the rider face and like the year display. So I'm not going to harp on that one too much. The watches themselves, they function very similarly to Gaia memories and that, but it is technically not infinite like Gaia memories are, because the belt itself does have its own electronics and it has its own electronic display. So there are pre-programmed things that later ride watches would not be able to account for, and like the images you get on the belt would end up being generic. So it's not completely infinite, so we can't really judge it by that. Yeah, on their own they're okay. Like if you can understand Japanese, I can tell you a little bit about the rider that the watch is based on. I don't know. They should, to me, have the same kind of functionality as the guy Lockseeds. They should be somewhere on par with that. But I don't know. They just don't strike me as interesting or unique as Lockseed does. I'm putting it right there. I still think O metals are visually cooler, even if they don't function as much. But this is into a total personal preference level. Okay, we are into the Reiwa era, and we are into Progrise keys. I love Progrise keys. So once again, we are very much in a situation like Xade, where most of the sound effect is in the gimmick itself. So you can actually have an infinite number of things. The belt isn't really going to stop you no matter what is playing on the key itself. I like the flip feel is very good. Like I love flipping the cover off and turning it into the key mode. I like how many different variations on the sound effects are capable. It's just a really nice little ability, and it's again similar to a Gashat. There's a little bit of functionality that exists when it's on its own that doesn't exist when it's combined with the belt, which makes it more of an independent toy. So yeah, I really like these. I really like these a lot. I think the Gashats have a few more tricks to them, but I definitely think it deserves to be really high up there. Wonder Ride books. Oh boy. Alright, so yeah, I'm on record. I really do not like Saber. I really do not like Saber. I cannot... When we have a superhero holding up a little plastic book, flipping open the cover, waiting for the book to shut up before they close it and put it in the driver, that doesn't look cool. Like, there's nothing about that looks cool. I don't think... There's no way to sell that into a way like a superhero would act. The designs themselves, like... Again, you're kind of locked into the same design. I like how, like, there's some of these that, like, extended further out, so they covered, like, 3 slots. I like that there's, like, some kind of, like, extra functionality for that. And the idea that you can combine 3 of them together and they all, like, overlap images and combine sounds is nice on paper. I don't like how they look with the big stickers. Like, I don't like how they basically turn the driver into just one big shelf of stickers. Does not seem or look cool to me that way. And I've never liked them. They just feel like, it feels like there's so much like, I don't know, like they never appealed to me. They just never looked like they were good items here. Like, I'll put them atop a bargain bin because they at least have a lot of electronic functions on their own, so I give them that. There's just nothing, they just don't seem interesting, you know? And, you know, part of it does become like, I don't understand much Japanese, so I don't hear the stories that it's yammering on about. But I don't think a superhero's little accessory toy should be yammering on in the first place. Like, these things just take forever to shut up, and they just get annoying. I don't know. Alright. Stamps. So, what do we do with Revice's stamps? So, you know, I've had them, like, they're way bigger than a lot of these gimmicks. Like, they're pretty huge. They're a nightmare to store because there's a button on top and a button on the bottom, so anytime, like, a bin shifts around, I hear, like, 6 or 7 of these things going off. I don't mind it too much. The stamp is not the most interesting thing they've ever done, but it allows for an interesting play function where, like, stamping it down on the driver feels neat. The magnet visual doesn't really work, but it's an interesting idea. And then you basically just turn it into a lever for the driver. It's okay. Like, it's okay. I've seen better implementation. Like, it feels okay, but there's a functionality there that I think is a little bit lost in just, like, the magnet should work better, I feel like. I don't think it should be, like, so easy to set off. And I don't know. Like, it feels like a clever idea. It's just like, again, it's kind of like the book, where it's just like, this doesn't feel cool. Like, this doesn't feel fun, you know? And then we get to the final one. Then we get to the final gimmick, which is the buckles. So, Geats is doing a lot that I really like so far with its toy line, and now we're dealing with these buckles. And the Geats line in general is so good at letting you just, like, make whatever you want. Like, once a bunch of these are out, you're going to be able to custom visual, like, any belt you want, from the cord to the left side, the right side. If you want, again, like the Forza switches, if you want different function, you can do that. But this goes even farther, because once you've got 2 of these attached, it doesn't even look like the right belt anymore. You know, if I were to use, you know, Boost and Magnum on one side, and then Ninja and Zombie on a completely different driver, you would think they were completely different belts for completely different riders. And technically, those configurations, they are, but they look so different from each other. I love the idea that I can basically customize how my rider belt looks, and I can have, like, whatever form function I want along with my sound effects. It's a really good system that like really kind of like, it's immersive is what I should say, because it's such a visual change, such an audio change, and how you play with it all changes. Ton of this. Now, obviously, there's still a lot to go with this one. We don't know how a super form is going to look when it comes to this driver. We don't know how the ultimate forms are going to function and how those buckles are going to play. But for what we've got now, I'm going to admit, yeah, this should be really, really high. Now, because we aren't done yet, I'm going to put it there. Because it has a ton of potential and it's really cool so far, but I really want to see where it's going. So this has the potential to be even higher than a Gashat by the time we're done. And I do have to dock it a little bit because while visually it is an infinite change system, electronically it is not, because it's all pre-programmed. Now that could change. We could get buckles that will have their own independent sound effects later on, and I kind of expect that to be the thing once we get to Super and Ultimate forms. But for now, we're going to leave it there. We're going to leave it there. And that is way more talking than I thought I'd be doing on this list, but it's not as long as some of them have been. So yeah, that is how I am laying out pretty much every rider gimmick that we've gotten so far. Yeah, it's a pretty wide spectrum of functionality here. And yeah, I think there's just a lot of cool toy to talk about. So, thank you for joining me on this comparatively quick tier list, because I know some of them have been just like painfully long, but I wanted one with a few entries so I could talk about them more instead of having to rush through everything. So thank you for indulging me, and thank you for watching, and as always, I will see you next time. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.